Thank you. So those are four excellent talks,
감사합니다.
relatively
네 분의
diverse
훌륭한
ways that different
다양한
companies
발표를
are
들었습니다.
making social value. And so I'm going to open the floor to our two discussants,
사회적 가치를
David and Garakai.
만드는 네 개의
First, if you'd like
회사의 발표를
to share your
들었는데요.
thoughts, what are the take-home
데이비드와
points that you really
가라카이
distilled away,
씨에게
and then what questions are left
어떻게
over.
들으셨는지
So I'll
그리고
give it
어떤 질문이
to
있는지
Garakai first.
여쭤보도록 하겠습니다.
Great.
게리카이
Thanks,
씨에게
Abdul.
먼저 발언권을
And thank you all
드리겠습니다.
to our great
감사합니다.
speakers today for getting our discussion going.
토론을
I
할
want
수
to start
있도록
off by
훌륭한 발표로
perhaps
맥락을
framing
제공해
up the
주신
question
발표자에게도
around innovation in the
감사드립니다.
healthcare space, because I think a number of the speakers
교육
actually
공간의
discussed that.
혁신에 대해서 먼저
Coming from the
질문드리고자
US,
합니다.
where 17% of GDP is
미국
being spent
GDP의
on the healthcare
17%가
sector, I think one of the
의료 부문에
questions and
지출되고
dichotomies we
있는데
face is how do we innovate in a
이러한
manner that actually allows us to be able to
이분법적
address the significant
상황에서
cost issues.
어떻게 하면은
When I
의료
look at
서비스를
some of the
제공하는데
advancements that are happening, particularly
코스트
with
문제를
advanced robotics,
해결하느냐 하는 것입니다.
it feels like a tale of
로보틱스
two
같은
stories.
것을
On the
보면은
one hand, there's
두
the ability
가지
for us to
이야기가
really be able
공존하는
to
것
address
같습니다.
a
한편으로는
substantive cost problem if we look at
실질적인
applications for
문제를
chronic disease management,
해결할 수
diabetes,
있는
remote sensing to be
해결책인 것
able to deal with
같습니다. 예를
people,
들어서 당뇨
or even if we have supplements
환자에게
in
원격 센서
surgery
부여를 통해서
that
의료
we have
관리를
from robotics,
한다든지
they seem to be
아니면
significant
로봇을
potential
이용한
for us to be able to address those
수술이라든지
cost problems. At
이러한
the same
원가
time,
문제를
however,
해결할 수 있는
the
여지가
fact of the
상당히
matter is
있어
the state
보입니다. 그러나
of robotics
동시에
today is that these are all very
현재의
expensive
로보틱스
devices.
현황은
It
상당히
makes it hard for
고가의
people in the healthcare
장비이기
system to be able
때문에
to access them
의료
and to really
체계가
access that
이를
innovation.
이용하기가
So one question that
여의치가
I have
않습니다.
is the thinking
따라서
around how
제
do we
질문은
begin to bring the thinking around the cost efficiency of the innovation
어떻게
into our design process,
혁신의
and so that we're
비용
able to actually
효율성을
design to value from the
디자인
beginning,
과정에
so that our innovation is
반영을
therefore able
해야
to access more
처음부터
people and then have that
이
much greater
내용이
impact
염두에
on the healthcare
두어지면서
system.
디자인이 되어서
maybe
의료
we can start
체계에서
there
더
if
많은
any
이들이
thoughts.
혜택을 볼 수 있을지요.
It feels that I should be the one that's supposed to answer this. Okay, so I have great discussions with a lot of healthcare companies in the US, like Ascension Group, Veterans Administration, and the situation is this, that first of all, they are on a very competitive market, so there is no room for much spending in innovation today. They have their hands full with operations and being able to be profitable. So what they say is that we need proof that those technologies work economically, for the user, for the society. If you can show us that giraffe will save us money, we'll buy it now. And that's what we're doing today. We're actually doing socioeconomic studies on every of those products, seeing what effects does it have on the individual, on the organization, and on the society. And that's why we can kind of be the incubator of the world. We can test things because our healthcare system is so structured. It's very easy for us to implement things and learn how things should be done in order to make the best benefit of it. And then we can, of course, Sweden is too small market for any company to be growing and expanding. So US is a great market for us in that case.
And perhaps just a follow-on question to this. One of the other trends I saw both in the education discussion and on the healthcare is just the idea that these technologies obviously don't take place in a vacuum. There are technologies which are coming into a system that is already functioning. So in the case of education, the educational system has been running for hundreds and hundreds of years. And therefore, for these technologies to be really impactful, it's going to take a substantial amount of reskilling of people in the current system to be able to take those technologies and really be able to integrate them into the ways of working. I'd be interested on both the education side, on the healthcare, to maybe discuss a little about what are some of the reskilling that we would need for the nurses or the teachers to be able to really take these technologies and integrate them into their current ways of working.
So that's a really, really important perspective to recognize, because there's two things that we really have to recognize that's happening right now. One is that the market in terms of tablets and devices is very aggressive, both globally and domestically in the US. Just in Los Angeles alone, just last year, the entire LAUSD, which is the largest school district in the country, invested $1.5 billion in tablets last year.
태블릿에 15억 달러를
And
작년도 한 해에 걸쳐서 투자했습니다.
Obama just announced the Connect
오바마
Ed
대통령이
initiative.
최근
Apple has
커넥트 에드
invested
이니셔티브
100
발표를
million.
했고요.
AT&T has
애플사가
committed
1억
100
달러를
million.
투자했고
Verizon has
AT&T도
committed,
1억
I think,
투자하겠다고 약정을 했고
50
버라이존은
So
5천만
you've
달러를
got a very
약정했다고
aggressive
갔습니다.
market who,
어쨌든
regardless
시장이
of the
굉장히
culture, is making a
적극적입니다.
big play in this
문화와
space.
무관하게 굉장히
But then
시장에 이렇게
the
적극적인
rub
노력들이
goes that
있습니다.
you've got a
그런데
culture who is not ready to
한편으로는
adopt.
이런 것들을 받아들일
I
준비가
don't,
안 된
you guys
문화가
have
있습니다.
the smart boards here in Korea.
한국에도 스마트보드가
But
있는지
smart board
모르겠습니다.
technology was a big technology in the late
스마트보드
90s.
기술은 90년대 말에
And the problem with the smart
정점을
boards was
찍었습니다.
very
그런데
similar in that
스마트보드의
all these
문제도
amazing technologies ended up
비슷했습니다.
in these classrooms,
훌륭한
but the teachers
기술을
didn't know how to
교실에
use them, and they ended up in
집어넣었는데
janitorial
선생님들이
closets.
이것을
And we're
어떻게
already
써야
starting
되는지
to see some of
몰라서
that type
결국은
of
청소하시는
pattern
분의
with
청소
the tablets.
도구함에 들어가는 신세가 되었습니다.
So,
태블릿도
but
같은
you've
운명을
got folks
걸을지
making a
모릅니다.
commitment
그러나
to grow the market. So
시장을 늘리기
now you're seeing a
위해서
lot of
꾸준히
folks
노력을
this year
하는 사람들이
already
있기 때문에
focusing
올해만
major
하더라도 많은
investment in
이들이
professional development of teachers and
선생님들의
certification
역량
programs.
강화와
And I think this is
선생님의
the largest
교원의
growth in the
교육
professional
인증
development
과정에
market
투자가 많이
education has ever
이루어지고
seen in the
있습니다.
United States.
아마
And
미국
it is
역사상 최대
it is
규모의
a direct
교사
response to this
커리어
issue.
개발 프로젝트라고 생각이
but,
되고 이것은
I think that when
기술의
we
제공과
develop
활용에
technology, we have
직결되는
a big
사안입니다.
bullseye on one side of the
예를
wall of our
들어서
company
기술과
that has
관련해서
3 layers.
저희 회사의
First
벽에
adopters,
보면은
right
이렇게
in the center,
벽에
that's our
화살
market.
관약 같은 것이 있습니다.
People,
중심
teachers
원이
and
3개가
administrators
겹쳐
who
있는데요.
know they need something
하나가
but don't know how,
뭔가가
and they
필요하다는
need
거는
something
아는데
to get
그것이
them to
무엇이
the next
되어야
step.
할지는 모르는
And then there are the
선생님들이
curmudgeons
있고
and the trolls.
다른 한편으로는
And
그
you're always going to
못된
have that in
요괴들이
any
있습니다.
new market,
기술
any
발전은
market
다
that's going to require
쌍심지를
that
켜고 반대하는
spectrum.
사람들이죠.
And eventually
어느
everybody
시장이건
comes to the
간에
fold, but you
이러한
really
다양한
need to support
이해관계자들이
that
있습니다.
center in a
그런데
very
중요한
healthy
것은
way, both
그
from a
중심부에
market
있는
position and a
무엇을
cultural
하고는 싶은데
and
뭐를 어떻게 해야
government
될지
position.
모르는 이들을
And I think that you're
도와줘야
starting to see
한다는
a
것입니다. 그
unification in the
대상이
States between
선생님들이건
government,
뭐
the
정부이건 누가
market,
됐던 간에요.
and the parent need that's helping drive
여기에는 또
that
부모도
change.
들어갑니다. 그래서 이런 수요와 욕구가 있기 때문에
just
변화가
add to that,
주도되고
I agree
있습니다.
totally, and especially when
첨언을
it comes to the troll
하자면
thing.
저도 공감합니다. 특히나 그
It's
요괴와
plenty of people,
관련해서
especially in the healthcare sector, that
특히나
will
의료 쪽에
object
많은
to using
사람들이
technology, especially
기술
elderly care.
사용이라면은 알레르기 반응을 보이는 사람이
but
많습니다. 특히나
we kind of,
고령층의 건강 관리에
we
있어서
need to
더
adjust the
그렇습니다.
message and use the
그런데
users
우리는
themselves. And
유저
I can give you an
자신을
example.
예로
There is
들면서
this
좀
possible
메시지를
politician that
조정할
was
필요가
very, very
있습니다.
against using
어떤
giraffe in elderly care.
정치인이 그
And we put her
고령층의
together with the elderly person
의료
who had the
서비스와
giraffe for several
관련해서
months.
이런 것을
And she said
사용하는
like this, well, you don't
것을
like technology,
굉장히
right? You'd
반대하는
rather have a
정치인이
real person
있었습니다.
coming to you.
그래서
And
수개월
the
동안
lady said,
이거를
no, I
사용한
like this much better because I don't
환자한테
like
가서
strangers in my home.
싫으시지요.
And
차라리
then, I
집에
mean,
누가
if we
의료
can
인력이
give
오는 게
the
나으시지요
voice, the
하고
speaker,
물어봤더니 그
or the
할머니가
microphone to the user
아닙니다.
themselves,
집에 모르는 사람이
they'll
오는
tell you what they
것보다는
want.
뭔가
That's
기기가
one of
있어서
the
거기다
keys, I
마이크에다
think.
대고 얘기를 하는 게 훨씬 좋습니다라고 얘기를
David?
했다는
And we've
것입니다.
seen in our case
데이비드 씨,
implementing our
저희의
glasses
경우
into surgery. And
저희의
the problems, the issues that
안경이 수술에 적용되는
surgeons and
것도
the
보았습니다.
doctors in a crucial operation had.
중대한 수술을
That
하는
they
외과
saw
의사들이
that in an early stage that they
초기
could earn money
단계에서
using our technology.
이 기술을
doing
이용하면은
advanced
상당히
surgery,
효율이
and they
있고
also
고도로
gain
정밀성을
better
요구하는
health for
수술도 더 잘 할 수
themselves.
있겠다.
Because in
그리고
what they
의사의
do today
건강에도
is that
도움이
they have
됩니다.
several screens or
왜냐하면은
a projector on a wall
의사들은 지금
where
수술방에
the data
여러
from
화면을
the
띄워놓습니다.
patient, the health of the
그래서
patient during the operation
환자의
is
수술
projected.
동안의
But
상태에
they have
대한
to
여러
lift
가지
their eyes all
정보가
the
여러
time from the
화면에
actual
있기 때문에 수술을
actual,
하다가 그 수술
operation
부위에서 가끔씩
surgery,
눈을 띄어서
what
이제
they're
화면
doing
여러
to
개를
check the data or listen to someone
둘러보아야
else.
합니다.
So they
내지는
are losing
누군가가 그
focus all the
환자
time,
상태에 대한
and
데이터를
they see
불러줘야
an
합니다.
inequality.
그러다
But,
보니까
if they
의사들
can project
입장에서는 집중이 깨지는
the data
거죠.
on the body. And
그런데
also
그
see
데이터를
what they
수술하고 있는
should
환자의
do on
부위에서
the patient.
눈을 띄지 않고
If they are
거기에
doing
투영해서 볼 수 있다면
changing a liver or taking out
들어서
part of the heart and place
뭐
a pacemaker instead.
장기
It can have a
이식
much better
수술이라든지
focus.
뭐 뭐가
So
됐든지 간에
on the
훨씬 더
test we did in the
수술에
US and
집중할
Sweden,
수
we see a
있다는
much
것이
better result.
미국과
And
스웨덴에서
that's
저희가
what we need.
했던
We need to
테스트의
see the result.
결과입니다.
That
우리가 필요한 게 바로 그겁니다.
surgeons
그
and the
결과를
doctors
봐야 됩니다.
in care themselves feel better
의료진
and
자신들이
they feel
이것을
secure.
써봤을 때 훨씬 더 이에 대해서
So this is a way
안심하고
to implement this type of
받아들이더라는
technology
것입니다.
in this high-end users.
이러한 하이엔드 유저에게 이러한 기술을
I've
받아들이도록
been
하는
working
방법을
trying to implement
말씀드렸습니다.
IT solutions as a consultant in healthcare. I know what the kind of bordering to hostility you can feel as an outsider, as a technology ambassador coming into this society of doctors and tightly knit hierarchical. And I think we have to overcome that. At the same time, we have one recent example in Korea about telemedicine, where the whole physician basically as a group stand up and say, we don't want this technology for several reasons. But I think at the same time, there are so many good examples within the ranks, so to speak, with technology interested physicians, and I think in Sweden what they're trying to do is to use them as better role models for the rest, and also share more about good examples, because for some reasons that business seems to be very localized. It can be even a hospital doesn't know what another hospital is doing, so just to bring them together has been very important, but it has been very tricky for many cultural reasons.
I will fill in there the project that Sing Health have done for a couple of years now, called the Digital Hospital. That's a really leap forward in taking this further to connect hospitals and solve that problem. So that's a really interesting project to take care of these kind of problems. The Digital Hospital in Singapore is fantastic.
David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'd like to open a bit of a new dimension in the conversation and challenge a bit of creative thought from our speakers. So the topic was social value creation, and for me, one of the things that pops to my mind is, what are we doing for the poorest of the poor in the world? So just let me start with a statistic. Gentlemen here have presented a number of technology and low technology solutions. 60% of the world's population has no internet access. So let me just start with a prompt to Lucian. I was very pleased to see a lot of low-tech, cardboard-based games. And also with this comment right now about retraining teachers. In the developing world, sometimes in certain countries, 20% of children will go to school, 10%. In addition, their parents themselves might not be educated. On the other hand, globally, about 75% of people have cell phones, so they do have the ability to be delivered messages through mobile technology. In a minute, give us your thoughts on how Game Desk's thoughts and ideas could be applied really to the non-OECD world. Then, prompt for Adam, the old age support ratio was going down in both rich countries and poor countries. How do you think about what you're doing and how it could be applied in perhaps a lower tech or lower capital intensity context in the global south? And then Eric, your barter concept could actually have a great application in countries where there's a huge lack of talent, human resources, but also sometimes where formalized economy is not as developed as it might be. So this barter concept, what do you think about that in terms of helping the young companies of the non-OECD countries develop? And then lastly for Nicholas, as a representative of the Swedish government, one of the globally leading donor countries, maybe can you give a critique of their responses on how they seem from a development perspective? And maybe as a bonus question, some people in the audience might be curious, can you tell us, because I think it's also related, what is P-Poople?
Okay, so just if I can limit each of your answers to his very nuanced and thoughtful question to about a minute apiece, that'd be really useful.
So it's interesting that Game Desk really got its start working with the low socioeconomic students. In fact, the first year of the company, we only focused on either no bandwidth, computers that were from the 90s, or no technology at all. And even within our own networks, we have that stratification. I think two things. One is that, obviously, one of the things I like to highlight is it's the approach to the learning, not the technology. And at the end of the day, technology is just a tool for learning, and it's about how you use it. So this approach can be used in a variety of contexts. The other thing that I'll highlight is that in all of the schools that we work in at risk, all
수많은
kids have
학교를
cell phones.
다니면서 일을 했습니다만은
And
애들 중에 휴대폰이 없는
the
애가
one thing
없었습니다.
that the culture or the infrastructure of these schools or the
이러한
infrastructure
학교의
of the homes,
문화나 아니면은
I
인프라나
firmly
아니면은
believe, as
집의
do a lot of
인프라를
folks
보면은
in my space,
많은
that
분들이
mobile
생각하시듯이
is
저
going
또한
to be
모바일
the
기술이
leveler in
앞으로
education. There is no
교육의
doubt in a lot of
평탄화를
our minds
가져오는
that if you see the trends now with
큰 역할을
certification
하리라
at
생각을
MIT,
합니다.
remote
요새
certification programs at
MIT의
MIT,
원격
Harvard
인증
is starting
프로그램
to
같은
offer
것을
programs of
보시면은요 잘 되고
certification
있고요.
for very low
하버드도
cost with
굉장히
basic
저렴한
connectivity
비용에
over mobile devices.
모바일 디바이스를
Mobile
가지고
devices are
접속만
going to
해도
keep getting better,
그 수행을 할 수가
more
있는
affordable,
자격
and
인증 프로그램들이
the
나오고
content
있습니다.
on those
모바일 기기는
devices are going to
점점
get
더
stronger and the
저렴해질
market's going to
것이고
grow.
모바일
And
기기에서
I
볼 수
think
있는 콘텐츠도
mobile is
강력해질
our
것이고
best
모바일
bet
시장이 또
for equal
성장할
access,
것이며
equal education
만인의 형평한
everywhere.
교육
And I
기회를
really want
어디에나
to
제공하는
push that
최종적인
because I
역할을
think that's
바로
our only
모바일이
hope
할
for truly
것입니다.
creating
진정한
options for everybody, no matter
만인을 위한
their
사회
socio-economic
경제적인
position.
배경과 무관하게 만인을 위한 교육 기회를
Okay,
창출하는데
there's a
이것이
couple
중요하고 그리 될
of
것이라 믿고
ideas I
있습니다.
have top of my mind, but one of course is that enabling these kind of technologies to be implemented in real life in Sweden will make sure that it will be used in a larger scale. Of course, the prices will go down. I mean, if you look at the cell phone itself, it was even that was not a commodity not too long ago. Even in Sweden, that was a high-class product, and nowadays it's everywhere. So I think by using technology in rich countries, we can actually get the technologies cheaper and more affordable. The other idea is that, for instance, in Sweden, until 2020, 40% of our workforce in healthcare will retire. So maybe we could go to highly crowded, highly populated areas in Africa, educate nurses, and bring them to Sweden. That's another idea.
The bartering problem is still a problem, but bartering in the Western world is illegal if you don't have a financial transaction. But in other countries that are not that well developed, you can still use bartering. And as we do between friends, I can go help you do your carpeting in your house at home, and we do
여러분의
some
집에
sort of
가서
bartering.
집에
But
카페트에
if you do
진공청소기를
it on a professional
돌려주고
level,
대신에
you have
여러분이
to
우리 집에
do
와서
it
뭘
also with
해주고
the
이렇게
professional
물물
tools.
교환을 할
And
수가 있습니다.
if you
프로페셔널한
don't have
서비스를
access to
주고받으려면
internet
프로페셔널한
and you
도구가
can't
있어야
use
되겠죠.
social
그런데 인터넷을
softwares
사용하지
and
못하면
how to
소셜
interact in between
소프트웨어를
each other,
이용해서
it's
서로
quite hard to see
인터랙션을 할 수가
how you
없으니
could work with people on a longer distance, but in a closer distance,
지리적으로
I
떨어져
think
있는 사람과
using
어떻게
communities
협력을 해야 될지 좀
to share
불분명합니다.
work
그러나
and to
지리적
build
근접성이
your
있다면
financial structures. I
공동체에서
think that's something
이러한
you should
금융
work on and
체계를
something
구축해
you should
나가는
implement.
것에
Because
주력해야
using
한다고
bartering is a
생각합니다.
strong wealth and a
왜냐하면
well
물물
of
교환을
new
통해서
education
내지는
between people.
맞거래를 통해서 이런 것들이 가능할 것이기
I'm not
때문입니다.
even going to try to comment on the efficacy of aid, but I can say this: I mean, Sweden was a developing country too, as Korea. I see a very strong connection between quick and rich and deep and fast deployment of a communication infrastructure with many of the other kind of things that come after that, including a lot of the services been seeing here. We need to have an infrastructure. And there's a lot of other positive effects coming with connecting people. The good thing now, and then again come back to the Swedish companies like Ericsson and so on, is that we see not only the mostly developed countries, but also China are taking a giant leapfrogging, totally skipping the physical infrastructure, fiber, at least landline and so on, going directly to the mobile world, taking considerably less effort to quickly deploy. And also, well, mobile is mobile. It can be pretty easily deployed as for electricity and so on. We've seen previously today or yesterday about charging through solar and so on. But there's a lot of positive effects of as quick as possible, as quick as can be afforded to connect the people. And then I see that the industry, maybe rather than the government, should be very proactive there, and I see great opportunities in Africa and so on there.
Good thinking.
So I want to finish with one last question. It's no coincidence that 3 of our panelists out of 4 are from Sweden. From the health field, we always admire Sweden because your healthcare system works. But you also happen to be one of the most equitable societies in the OECD. And there's sort of a going dogma in the United States that you take some level of inequity to drive innovation, but yet you sort of bust that model. And really directed at Nicholas, I'm wondering, how do you square that? And what would you say to American politicians who would argue, and really politicians to other societies would argue that you need some level of inequality to drive innovation?
Well, as a science diplomat, the ambassador, if he was here, would kill me if I even tried to get into the politics side of it. But I think it's been pretty well shown that there's maybe larger negative effects of inequality than we previously thought. I mean, we all want to have a society where you can get on top and where you actually, if you work hard, you will get better life and so on. But there's a price if you build in too much inequality. So I think one thing I would like to mention, at least, not commenting on US, but there's been a lot of investment in Sweden on the trust of basically public trust, of how much the citizens are trusting the government. If you're very careful with that very fragile entity, the trust of the people in the government, then you can create a lot of things, including building in understanding that maybe if you take a little bit lower advancement, or it will be a little bit not as good for you, but you will, on the other hand, help up a lot of other people. Let's take this principle in the schooling system and so on. And if you have no one is really left behind principle in the society, and if you have managed to build a consensus for that, sure, sacrificing some of the top talent and so on, but at least in Sweden, trying to gain much more as a society, then you in the end, you end up at least in a society where it's very nice to live in. And I think, but in order to do that, I think the key is to build a trust between the government and the citizens. That's the key takeaway I have.
And also show that actually by paying taxes, you get the value out of it. I mean, the schools are free, the hospitals are free, the roads you travel
내면서
are free.
가치를
You
활용한다고
don't have to pay for
생각합니다.
those.
교육도 무료고,
Of course,
뭐
it's
이런
obvious
의료
for many
서비스도
Swedes, but it's
무료고,
quite
도로 사용도 무료입니다.
amazing for many Americans. I mean,
물론
if
이제
you're
스웨덴
pregnant as a woman, you have
얘기입니다만은 미국인
18 months
입장에서는 놀라울 뿐입니다.
of leave with
여성이
pay.
임신하면은 유급 휴가가 장장
Thank you so much.
18개월입니다.
It's been an excellent panel. If you could join
훌륭한
me,
패널
a
토의
round of applause for
감사합니다.
the
다 같이
panelists
큰
and
박수
the discussants.
부탁합니다.